Welcome to Miss Retro Reads. Today I'm going to be telling you something that you might not believe. It's about a saint, Saint Therese of Lisieux. Now, a little backstory. Saint Therese of Lisieux was a Carmelite nun. If you don't know exactly what's the difference between nuns and sisters, nuns are women who would do something like they contemplate God all the time or they pray all the time. Much like somebody who is a scientist, they study science. We all use things that are in science, like we might not see electricity, but we can certainly see the light that is turned on by electricity. And sometimes we see things happen like maybe prayers are answered and we're like, wow, I've been praying so long and now all of a sudden that prayer is answered. But these people pray all the time and they don't always see the fruits of the prayers that they pray. And sisters are people who maybe are in the hospitals and they help people, or they teach and they help people. So that's the difference. She just wanted to go into a convent and pray all her life. She had that special vocation. All right, so after she died, there were so many miracles that happened. It was crazy. And she was shortly canonized after that. I didn't know that she helped many, many soldiers in World War I. And I was given this old book that was printed so long ago, and it was given to me by some Carmelite nuns, and they said, we're just going to let you read this. Please be careful with it when you turn the pages. It was that old. But there's a book that came out pretty recently where they took all of these letters that soldiers had written about things that had happened to them, and they reprinted it. And it's called Stronger Than Streel, Soldiers of the Great War Write to Saint Therese of Lisieux. So I'm going to tell you a few of the stories in the hopes that you might go and get this book. It's printed by Angelico Press and is still available. I found mine just off of eBay. So here's our first story. I saw a cloud open up. November 4th, 1914. Reverend Mother, as I came and told you in Lisieux on October 21st, I am a protege of the little Therese of the Child Jesus, and have great confidence in her. I visited her grave in May of 1914, and came back deeply impressed. Nonetheless, when the war was declared, I resisted my wife's entreaties and left without going to confession. It was human respect that held me back in the fulfillment of my Christian duties. I had gone astray from the church since my first communion. I accepted, however, a relic and an image of the little sister, and every time I found myself in danger during battles, I instinctively called upon her for help, and noticed that each time she protected me and my comrades, for I never saw any of them killed or wounded right next to me. Roughly in the mid-September, we were lying flat in the trenches of the Gotha near Reims. It was a difficult time, for the two artilleries kept thundering. I was thinking mournfully of my little family, and said to Saint Therese, my sister Therese, give me back, I beseech you, to my wife and children. I promise to visit your grave as soon as I am back home. No sooner had I said this prayer than I saw a cloud open up, and the face of the saint stood out against the blue sky. I thought I was the victim of some hallucination. I rubbed my eyes several times, and staring again at the vision, but I could have absolutely no doubt, since her face was more and more distinct and resplendent. I could contemplate her this way for 1 or 2 minutes. I particularly noticed her most beautiful eyes, lifted heavenwards as if to pray. Since that time, I have always been courageous. I haven't felt lonely any more. I have also had the strongest hope of securing my loved ones again, and have kept alive an unwavering resolution to return to the God of my childhood. Indeed, a short time afterwards, when I was evacuated due to sickness, and when at the hospital where I was being treated, it was asked who wanted to receive communion. I wasn't afraid of showing my desire, and I promised straight off that I would always fulfill my Easter duties. Use this letter as you see fit, Reverend Mother. I am no more ashamed. At the contrary, I am proud to be witness to the goodness of God and the Sister Saint Therese towards a poor sinner. Auguste Coussinard, reservist, 5th Infantry Regiment from Falaise. The Voice of Saint Therese. Lisieux, January 12, 1915. At Lundermount, I occupied a room where I found placed above the mantelpiece a portrait of Saint Therese of the Child Jesus, a saint I already knew and prayed to with confidence, for whose beatification I pray to God every day. I got into the habit of praying my rosary before this image. Well, on the evening of September 16th, my prayer was suddenly interrupted in the following way. I very distinctly heard a voice saying to me at intervals, "You will be wounded before the end of the month." But all the less so because from this day forward you will accept this sacrifice generously for God. The voice which imposed itself on my mind during more than a quarter of an hour was, I felt, Saint Therese. Try as I might to resume my vocal prayer, I still perceived the same warning, so that I said aloud, "My God, I accept in advance all it will please you to send me." That was what Saint Therese wanted, for I could finish my rosary right away, but when I went to bed, the memory of what had occurred kept coming to my mind, and on the following morning I wrote it down in my notebook. We experienced heavy fighting on October 7th and the 17th. Eventually, on the evening of the 20th, just when I was getting ready to relieve a company in the first-line trenches, the regiment was given the order to get ready for an attack that should take place on the following day in the wood of Mortemar before dawn. My reserve company was to be sacrificed, if need be, to take ground in that wood. I was issued an order to that effect. When I received the last instructions before battle, I said to the commandant, "We are heading for death." And such was my conviction, not only for my own troop, but also for the whole regiment. On October 21st, at around 3 a.m., while we were advancing towards the muster point, I was reflecting on the events that were to take place in a few moments, and on what could happen to me. So I said this prayer again, "O Lord, do with me as you will." 3 hours later, I received 4 bullets and was transported to the rear. Besides relatively light wounds, the radius of my right arm was broken and my hand was transpierced. The radial artery, however, was not at all damaged. If it had, it could have resulted in a hemorrhage, possibly a lethal one. Moreover, on the spot where the bullet got out, in spite of the ravages it produced, no tendon was cut, so that I will keep the use of my fingers. How much I have to thank God and the sisters for so obviously protecting me. As soon as I arrived in the hospital of Toul, I promised to write all about it to the Carmel of Lisieux. Admittedly, I expected to be wounded in the end of September, since the voice had told me, "You will be wounded in the end of the month." But for divinely wise reasons, I am in no doubt about it. God considered it inappropriate to reveal to me the end of which month I would see the fulfillment of the prophecy. Therefore, I will never forget the event of considering a huge grace, and if it can be useful to the glorification of Saint Therese, I gladly accept that it could be published. Captain Master, Captain 232nd Infantry Regiment, Knight of the Legion of Honor. I saw Saint Therese as an angel. Contreville, December 23, 1917, Auxiliary Hospital, No. 9, bed number 69. To His Reverence the Parish Priest of Contreville, Bosage. Considering I have had faith in the servant of God, Saint Therese of the Child Jesus, since March of 1916, I want to relate the following fact, begging you to kindly forward it to Carmelite Monastery of Lisieux. On October 3rd, 1917, my regiment and 2nd of March Regiment of Algeria was appointed to take possession of the sector of the woods of Querrières et Bezonville. On October 4th, my group arrived in the valley, and I was appointed by my officer to defend the front of the communication trench, which led to our lines and was situated 60 meters ahead towards the enemy lines in case of an attack. From the date to October 13, 1917, we were exposed on a daily basis to heavy bombardments and gas emissions, from which I was always spared. There were frequent attacks from the enemy in the other groups of my regiment. Seeing how things were going, I told my lieutenant, "I expect us all, in all probability, to be attacked this way before we are relieved." And here is what happened. On October 14th, at about 3:30 in the morning, I was standing in my usual place, when I was suddenly dazzled by a great silver brightness, and much to my astonishment, before my eyes I saw Sister Therese, like an angel. She was walking left and right, holding in her hand a very short saber. I was compelled to follow her, and I found myself in front of a swamp that made a natural defense, and was located behind our lines. I rubbed my eyes, pinched myself, and said to myself, "You're not asleep, though. What does this all mean?" In brief, I went back to my previous place and saw once more with surprise this vision moving about in like manner. I then understood it was a warning from heaven. I didn't lose a single minute. I quickly inspected my post and had the pins pulled out of my grenades in case of an unforeseen attack. When it was all over, I picked up my watch, which said that it was 4 o'clock, and I thought, it's just the time when the Boches usually launch an attack. I said nothing to my men except that they had to watch well and be careful. I had been surveilling the side of the swamp for no more than 2 minutes when I saw a crawling shadow sneak away, and 2, then 3 in single file. I first believed the relief patrol was arriving and immediately challenged them in Arabic with the word chokni, which means "who goes there?" But the sole response I received was to hear a grenade burst, which, fortunately enough, landed beyond the small parapet of the communication trench. "Here are the Boches," I exclaimed. "Grenades, bombard!" I immediately threw 3 grenades. I then saw a German advancing towards me. No hesitation, I killed him right away with a shot of automatic pistol, and he fell down at my feet. From that moment on, it turned into a huge exchange of grenades and almost a hand-to-hand fighting. I didn't lose my courage. I stirred up my men, and soon wounded myself. I only commanded the louder, "Bombard!" But there was no more reaction for the enemy. Down to my last ounce of strength, I sat on the parapet. Everything was quiet again, and I was relieved by my section officer arriving with reinforcements, and then evacuated to the dressing post with all my men, including 4 wounded. I didn't forget to immediately thank my protector, who has always preserved me since December of 1916, and whose celestial warning was our safety. This declaration is certified by the author himself, whose signature below can be published. He recommends to all his comrades the utmost confidence in the servant of God, Therese of the Child Jesus. A. Diaz, Sergeant, 2nd Fusilier March Regiment. Isn't that crazy? There were so many stories that it fills a whole book. I couldn't find the one story that I remembered. I was much younger at the time, and there was someone who had never been taught anything about his faith. Like, he wasn't Christian or anything. He just, I guess, was pagan, which wasn't as common back then as it is now, but he said that this woman appeared to him with a veil on her head, and she taught him the catechism through the alphabet. And then when he got out of battle, he went to a priest, I believe, and they were shocked to find that he had learned all this of his catechism without anybody to teach him. And he said, "Oh, it was this woman with a veil on that taught me." And then they said, "Is it this woman?" They showed him a picture of Saint Therese, and he's like, "Yeah, that's her." So really cool stories. My brother was telling me about a general who Saint Therese was trying to tell him the better way of fighting, and she came up with a plan for him, but I couldn't find that story either. So there's lots of good stories out there you can find. I find that we take saints and we try to change their lives to fit some kind of narrative. And like Saint Francis is always shown as loving animals and hating war or something like that. And I'm like, well, let's read his full story. And that's why I did. I read the full story of Saint Francis of Assisi. And then with Saint Therese, all I ever heard about her was that she smiled all the time and she loved roses, which doesn't give you a really good idea of a saint. But in reading this book of how she helped so many soldiers, this is crazy. Why she particularly honed in on the soldiers, I don't know. Something we have to think about. One thing on prayer that's super cool that a priest explained to me once was it's kind of like rain. You have all of this moisture that evaporates, goes up into the air in a cloud, and maybe moves to another part of the world. And then it becomes rain and rains down on the ground. And he likened the sisters' prayers to that, where they're praying for people who will not pray for themselves. And so if you see somebody just convert, you're like, whoa, how did that happen? Well, it's bought at a price. And there are sisters who are in convents all over the world in a hidden life, that they don't go out except to go to the doctor, to give their lives as a sacrifice to God. And this is a special vocation that God calls them to do. So just when you thought you knew everything, nope. There's people out there that are specifically there just to pray for you. Isn't that comforting? And if you have people that you're praying for, never give up. Just keep on praying, just a little bit a day. Just talk to God. Say like, hey, God, help so-and-so. They need it. They're going through a rough time. And please say a prayer for me every now and again. I would appreciate it. And I pray for all of you. And we'll figure out another religious book to read next Sunday. But in the meantime, you can get this book, Stronger Than Streel, by Angelico Press, and read it yourself. It's pretty exciting. And thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.